It's the International Organization for Moralists, hence Moralist International. The Institute of Price Stability is just one of its many mind babies, as is the coalition. So what I'm hearing is that we're moral intern bitches? I'm gonna turn to Kim. Doing one's job doesn't automatically make one anyone's bitch, says Kim. Besides, there are more nefarious powers to work for than the moral intern. Are you a moral intern? Or moralist? I ask Thomas. Oh, we know his name. We shouldn't know his name. He's still Sunday friend, but apparently we know his name. Players. But of course. But why? Because moralists believe in a normal, stable world governed by democratic values. That sounds about what I was talking about before. It's a reasonable reasonable those are reasonable principles, right? Yeah. And it makes sense that they would have it's sort of funny that they are called moralists because it is, well, it's complicated because the moral of it is not necessarily misguided. It's just the effects of it. I was reading the other day specifically about the history of neoliberalism. There's this Martin Luther King Jr. speech. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it is a speech. I caught a quotation from him, and then I was looking around for it, and I found speeches proper, but I also found interviews, and it was I don't know if it wasn't an interview or not. I think it was a speech though. But MLK Jr. said was talking about the people who prioritize or who care about a negative. What was the name? Let me check. Okay, I got the quote over here, or rather my notes. He was talking about the people who are more devoted to order than to justice. They prefer a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, rather than a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. And I think this is such a strong take on this sort of like it's. I think it's very clear that the writers are satirizing. I'm pretty sure the writers of this game are satirizing neoliberalism with this guy over here. Even the name is sort of a little bit of an interesting take on it, even though I don't know if it relates to everybody as it does to me. But I see some undertones here with the name The Sunday Friend. And I would say the writers of this game, because in anybody else, it's just as a random character, this character doesn't say much, but in the context of this game, it does have a lot of the feel of a satire. And MLK Jr. went on to say, I'm looking for my notes over here. This is off screen, of course. I'm not showing them to you, just so you know that they shouldn't be showing up on screen right now. I'm just looking off screen. They who constantly say, I agree with you and the goal you seek, and this is why I was talking about before about how they are about the morals, but cannot agree with your methods of direct action. And of course, MLK Jr. was on the left side of the spectrum in politics, of course, and specifically talking about the methods of direct action here being taking on the establishment, and where, well, the U.S. is kind of a rich and varied storyline of multiple different, well, not very different, but still different political schools of thought. And certainly in comparison to the 60s, to what came after in the 80s, and certainly what it is right now, it's all this discussion assumes very different meaning when depending on the context in which they're taking place, these discussions. Let's see. Lieutenant, are you a moralist? Ooh, I could turn to Kim. Would I know that Kim? Well, actually, you know what? I would say that Kim might be a moralist. I don't know. I would say, well, he's a cop, so, it's not that cops can't be left-wing. It's just that it takes a certain kind of compromise for cops to be left-wing, unless, of course, they're just not thinking about it the same way that I'm thinking about it. Which is another thing, because you can just have a different perspective on life and just say, oh, okay, I'm left wing or I'm center or whatever, and just see things differently from me. But I'm saying my own piece here, so I'm gonna turn to Kim and I'm gonna ask him, me? You've managed to catch the lieutenant off guard, but only for a moment. He quickly recomposes himself. I am a lieutenant of the RCM, dedicated to maintaining law and order in Ravachol. Doesn't that sound like a lot of what I was just quoting from MLK Jr.? And that's why I'm sort of referencing it. People more devoted to order than to justice. Yeah. A very moralist answer, says something, friend. See, this is why I'm saying this character is written as a satire. And it isn't an over-the-top satire, though, because it's difficult. It's very difficult to, just in a generalistic sense, it's very difficult to satirize centrism, just because it's the status quo for a lot of, certainly for us. Well, I'll say for me as a European citizen, and I would say for Americans as well, and for the vast majority of the world. But the point is, it's difficult to satirize because there's milk toast. Milk toast is what I'm saying. The lieutenant is practiced in the art of putting on a show for someone's superiors, says our esprit de corps. Yes, he is. Oh, that's a very interesting question, because he's saying specifically moralists believe in a normal, stable world governed by democratic values. Asking what is a normal, stable world is, of course, at the center of his definition. But also another one is, normal and stable to whom? Because, it's not just that you define normal and stable yourself. Like, imagine there's a dictator, and the dictator says, normal and stable is so, and so, and we are going to, make sure that this country runs normally and stably. And the dictator says that, and that's that, right? If everybody... if it is normal and stable for everybody, then yes, sure, it's the dictator who is defining normality and stability. But it does mean that the question, to whom is it normal and stable, doesn't have as much of a problem. The problem is that in practical terms, it's never normal and stable for everybody, because somebody is going to be stealing from somebody. Somebody's going to be, taking your shit, right? And in comes the rule and the law and says, no, we're going to make a system that is normal and stable for the person who lost their stuff, or for the person who took their stuff. Or, there can't be a compromise, because in practical terms, there's always a divide. So normality and stability doesn't apply to everybody. It depends on what you're referring to, because, of course, it depends on what level you're discussing, because, sure, it's still normal and stable for the thief. It's the thief knows that he's gonna get caught and is gonna go to prison or whatever, if you have a prison as an institution. But there's limitations to what I'm talking about here, is what I'm saying. But the question of to whom is it normal and stable is also pretty important. I'm gonna ask this one though. The Occident is part of the normal world. Orange sur la clef. He went on for a very... this just feels imperialistic to me, but it's because it uses the word Occident. It's complicated. Martinez doesn't seem very normal or stable to me. Martinez? No, Martinez is something else. What about the rest of Ravachol? Is it part of the normal world? Ravachol is generally difficult. It's led by an interim government, which means it hasn't yet achieved full democracy. But they are working towards it. You're all doing very well here, relatively speaking. He gives you an approving nod. And we have one of those famous 4-line choices. I think the game sometimes throws a 5-line choice at us in these particular occasions, but I think these are specifically regarding these ones over here. Communist, fascist, ultra-liberal, and moralist. Yeah. I don't know what these are. I don't know what... I think in modern day, real world terms, the ultra-liberal might be because these of course are in game. The ultra liberal might just be classical liberal, whereas the moralist would be the neoliberal, and the fascist is pretty self-explanatory, and the communist is also pretty self-explanatory. Although there's no room here, and I've noticed that before. There's absolutely no room for any other kind of socialism, for like social democracy or anarchism or any other thing. No matter how you define other types, it's just communism or bust. And yeah, that's why I mentioned before. I think I might have commented on this, but that's why I mentioned the first time we got. I don't know what Fury was talking to us before, what part of our brain was talking to us, but I commented, does this game want me to be, or does this Fury want me to be a tanky? A tanky is I'm not one to talk because I'm not very in line, not necessarily in line. What I mean is I'm not very aware of the latest definitions of things, but as far as what I meant by tanky is people who are left-wing but authoritarian. That's basically the gist of it. Let's see. I don't think I'm a moralist. Moralism sounds incredibly boring. I want more action. Moralism is the ideology of foreign occupiers. Revachol must be governed by Revacholians. That's a very interesting take. Democracy is a meaningless sham as long as the working class is under the boot heel of capital. Yeah, that's the criticism. That's one of the criticisms of the neoliberalism. It's not that democracy is wrong. It's just that what he calls democracy, and you can see here, full democracy and whatnot, is not actually a democratic institution, or a truly democratic institution, because voting isn't democracy. You can vote. You can have all the votes you want, but it's that you can vote for your dictator. That's still not democracy. And of course, there's different. It's a process. It's a whole thing. There's a spectrum, and it's complicated and very contentious as well. It's like every time I'm talking about. I'm talking to the fourth line is. It's like every time I'm talking to people, I'm choosing option D. None of the above. Is that moralism? Oh my god. I didn't choose. I don't think I chose. I think I chose this last option once. I don't think this line over here is contextual. I don't think it's checking to see if I'm always choosing option D. But I can actually. It's me saying it out loud. And of course, again, it's a critique. It's a veiled critique anyway. It's a satire of centrism. It's the milquetoast thing that I was talking about before. Let's go with this one over here because that's what's cutting to the heart of the matter. Although there's other takes on it. I suppose this is one take. The lieutenant clears his throat. Of course, he says, the detective's personal views do not represent the views of the RCM. Ah, my friend, but the lesson of the revolution is that communism doesn't work, my friend. It certainly didn't win the war, that's for sure. Communism doesn't win the war. I don't know anything about what the revolution was. We can't comment about it. This is, of course, a mimic of... this, of course, mimics the typical criticism of communism. And, again, I understand why they went with a single left-wing ideology here, I suppose. I'm not really sure. I suppose there's two right-wing ideologies and a centrist, but it's taken from a world, and also it's written by Latvian people, and they were in the United. What does USSR stand for? United Socialist States Republic. Either way, it's there's a historical context here. There's reasons why it's written like this. It's written. It's actually very interesting that it is so personable. The writing of this game, it's so blatantly written by real people rather than just writing with the intention of creating a game. It's writing with the intention of telling a perspective from somebody. It's you can feel the lived history of the writers in this game, and that is something that sometimes happens in video games, but not often. You see that a lot more in books though. But yeah. it didn't work because the coalition crushed it violently. Well, I suppose that, yeah, again, I don't know why it didn't work. Yeah. We just haven't trialed real communism yet. Yeah, that's a very historically common defense of it yet, as well as the also I wouldn't be able to tell how it sort of fits into the whole history of the USSR as well. I forget the name of the philosopher that criticized Marx, at least specifically criticized the later works of Marx, because Marx has a very long history of writing, and the later works of Marx, as far as I am aware, tend to become a little bit more around this sort of stuff, trying to patch the theories that he proposed in his earlier works, trying to see, oh, this doesn't work because of this, and just it's sort of trying to come up with it, in the eyes of this philosopher that I'm thinking of, and I don't remember the name of, trying to come up with excuses for it. So this is a typical one. Although, if to some, is it Trotskyians? Is it Trotsky? Is it Trotsky the one that basically didn't make it very far into his political career in the USSR back in the 1920s? I think it was Trotsky. People who think like Trotsky was more about Trotsky had a different attitude towards socialism than Stalin did, and to communism specifically, because of course communism here meaning, at least historically speaking, I don't know if it means that in this game, but historically speaking, it means the common ownership of the means of production. But of course, later on, and specifically after the 1950s, it became more a synonym to controlled, is it called controlled economies? Planned economies. I'm not sure. Which is, of course, a very far cry from the original intention of communism. And as far as I know, wasn't the USSR, and this is a question to those of you in the comments that have knowledge of the USSR and maybe even lived in ex-USSR countries, or live in ex-USSR countries. Is there any truth in me saying that the USSR thought of itself as a revolution in progress? Is this a real thing? Is this an actual thing? Because I think that is one of the justifications for using certain non-socialist methods, or at least more authoritarian methods anyway, in its government rule, because it justified itself by using, and I think China might still do this, although the current prime minister it's a weird thing. Politics of China are weird. I didn't get very far when I tried to learn about what's going on in there, because it's wacky. Anyway, if you think the US is weird, you haven't learned it. You don't know anything. China is super weird. Anyway, the point is, I think China might have that attitude as well. Just sort of the revolution is still in progress, comrade. We're gonna do other things, and we're gonna go for the real communism next week or something. You know what I mean? So that is a very common, of course. You're telling me this world here is working out well, and that is, I would say for me personally, I'm role playing myself here more than my character necessarily. Although these are very personal questions anyway, in the first place. I think this is the strongest argument, really. It's moving towards the right direction, and that's all that matters. I'm so glad that I ramble about this stuff, because he's immediately mimicking my understanding of that second option. Remember how I was saying about how wacky China is, and about how it's the revolution in progress thing and whatnot? Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's the same excuse. It's the same old tired excuse. It's just, it's clubism. It's people it's my club, so I'll defend it to the death. And that doesn't get anywhere. Anyway, progress is measured in centimeters, my friend. Oh, right, because they had a different... oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Now, enough of this delightful political interlude. Was there anything else you wanted me to ask? Yeah. Tell me about Sur-la-Clef. What's there to say? Sur-la-Clef is a modern, urbanized country that measures very, very high on the Human Development and Freedom Index, mostly. That's a real thing, I think. I think that's a real thing. Yeah. Mostly, though, it's known as the executive heart of EPIs. Moreover, it is a great sponsor of less emerged countries. Ravachol is only one of its many darlings whose progress, I can't do the accent, I'm sorry, progress, it supports and cherishes. What makes Ravachol my god. What makes Ravachol sur la Clef's darling? Because a great percentage of Ravachol's culture hails from Sur-la-Clef, its language, its people, its cuisine even, or at least in the downtown La Delta area. And our perception remembers Jamrock and other parts of the international zone have been mercifully spared of Sur-la-Clef's love for meatballs and mashed potatoes. Who likes meatballs and mashed potatoes? I can only think the Swedish. I'm sure other countries like it as well. I don't know that the Swedish like mashed potatoes specifically. I don't like mashed potatoes. I just like, give me some puree for days. Just purees and meatball. That's all I need. Puree is the best thing. I love puree. Or puree or whatever it's called. Because it's got two E's. Why is it not puree? It's French. I know. It's weird. Anyway, tell me about Orange. Orange is an exemplary nation who is a core member of EPIs, contributes 28% of our annual budget. Next to Sur-la-Clef, Orange is probably the most prominent member of the international community. Which one of them is more EPIs? As founding members, they are both very EPIs. Orange carries a lot of political weight, while Sur-la-Clef takes care of the business side of things. Sur-la-Clef hosts the headquarters of major EPIs institutions. Okay, but outside of EPIs, what is Orange? Orange's economy is one of the most advanced in the world. It has successfully transitioned from heavy industry to advanced services, and generally acts as an engine for sustainable change in the international community. Can't you just talk like a normal person, though? About what? About Orange. Just tell me what it's like there. Oh, it's very urban, very well organized. Their streets are clean. Their horse cars run on time. The people are polite and efficient. Like I said, they are an example for the less emerged nations to follow. Which is a very imperialistic notion as well. Although, there's something to be said about cleanliness, I suppose. Although that is also a very racially charged term in certain circumstances. But then again, so is urban, so I don't know if he's probably not talking about that. Our reaction speed says, if he knows so much about Orange, maybe he also knows about Orange's mercenaries. Oh, no, I can't, though. Well, enough business talk, or enough business. Let's talk about something else. Whatever you wish. The man who was lynched outside your window was from Orange. Oh, that's unusual. The Oranges are not the kind of people you associate with heinous crimes. It's such an upstanding and responsible country. Yeah, it's not cool. Although it's fiction, so I don't know how right he is, but still not cool. That's not how I would describe this guy, though. Well, certainly one cannot rely simply on generalizations. Yes, that's what I was referring to. That would go against our commitment to individual freedoms. Sure. And of course, any loss of life is a tragedy. The man seems to observe a moment of silence. So tell me, what have you learned about the victim? Well, his name was Lely. Lely, that's an interesting name. Well, Lely wasn't his real name. It was a nom de guerre, which means war name. Ah, he was a soldier? A mercenary. Aha, a condottiere. The man says, as though describing a character from a fantasy novel. Yes, it's hard to believe they still exist. He was a motherfucker and a killer. Officer, you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. It's okay, he told me so. So you spoke with the victim before he died? No, that was after he died. The man gives the lieutenant a nervous look. Oh, come on, don't act like I'm the worst out of here. He just told me to not speak ill of the dead, even though the dead was a prick. And I'm the wrong person for saying he told me So after he died, I mean, it's like, where can a man get some respect around here? The lieutenant raises his eyebrow as though he's stopped paying attention. Your partner's doing you a favor by pretending not to have heard your insane ramblings. Shut up, Kim. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. And you, empathy. It's not insane. I'll kill you in the face. The empathy. He liked to get high and tell brag. Is that proper English? I don't think it's proper English, but if it is, it's very charming English. Let's see. He liked to get high and brag about war crimes he had committed. Extremely distasteful behavior. Although not necessarily, that sounds about right for a country. It's historically. Anyway, let's not go there. I cannot condone either drug use or needless boasting. Suffice it to say, that is not how we do things in Sur-la-Clef. Well, he was a poor kid before the Orangese government put him in a military academy. The man nods. It's the responsibility of any good welfare state to take care of its most unfortunate citizens. Yeah, they turned him into a psychopathic killing machine. Which is also a commentary on real-world governments, by the way. I don't need to tell you more about that, do I? They gave him a successful career. The man holds up a finger as though he had made a brilliant point. Also, he was a mercenary after being discharged, which kind of tells me there's that whole welfare state that he's referring to. Might not be as welfarian as you might want it to be, because if he's discharged and he doesn't get, well, he might have been, what's the word? Dishonorably discharged, I suppose. But yeah, if a soldier is discharged and doesn't get a pension immediately, that's a problem. That's a problem. Anyway, after he was discharged from the military, he joined a group of mercenaries. And I'm thinking he didn't have a pension, otherwise he wouldn't join the mercenaries. Because that's what real-life veterans do. It's private contract work in a lot of cases. A lot of them also go homeless because it's very bad. The PTSD and just the economic situations and all this sort of stuff. Because, military... Well, I remember... so Portugal doesn't have conscription. And I think stopped having conscription in 70... I want to say 72. I'm not really sure. I would think it's not 72. Because our revolution was in 74. And when I say our revolution, it's the Carnation Revolution, if you want to look into it. An interesting event in history. But anyway, we toppled a fascistic regime and basically instituted social democracy. I think it was 72, though. I think it was, yeah. Anyway, we had conscription before, and I remember growing up hearing stories about my family members that were conscripted and went to war, some of them. And certainly went to the, I don't know the name of the thing. English has a name for it, but, when you are conscripted, you go to, for a few months or a year or something. You go to a place in the military where you just train and learn how to be an army person. That has a name. Anyway, I didn't want to do that because I had hopes at the time of my 18 years of age. I had hopes to go to the university and stuff like that. And so for me, growing up, I'm 32, by the way, right now. I think 31? 32. For me growing up, it was my biggest concern was precisely taking away, the military taking my youth away, or not my youth, but my early years of working and learning and all that sort of stuff. So I was pretty concerned about that. Growing up, I was also I had also hopes of being a professional cyclist, bicycle rider, cyclist, road cycling, because I was doing that growing up as well. So it was this whole thing, but that was my biggest concern, and I understand, as far as I understand, that is also a very big problem for the job market for veterans who leave the army at the age of 28 or 30 or even later, especially later, probably gets even harder, where your marketable skills are a problem, are serious considerations. So, yeah. He says that is extremely unfortunate. Yes, it's My accent. I'm gonna stop now. That is extremely unfortunate, he says. It's regrettable that this practice has a history in certain Occidental nations, even highly advanced members of EPIs. The mercenaries he's referring to, and he continues, but rest assured the RNG's government has committed to producing a timetable that would lay out a path to transition to a professional army. Soon there will be no need for mercenaries like this poor man. Wait, you mean there's no professional army? What do you mean professional army as well? Well, that solves that then. What kind of timetable are we talking about here? Oh, it's hard to put an exact date on it, he says. I believe the proposal for the timetable is due to be completed around 60 or 61. What? That's like a decade from now. The man nods. See, that's the kind of progress that can be made when the moral intern makes possible, he says. Well, as a merc, he killed a lot of people and the Seminoles Islands to advance RNG's business interests. I think they don't have national armies. I think that's the implication here. The man shakes his head solemnly. A great shame, he says. Yes, colonialism is a dark specter in Orange's past. Who's talking about the past? It's still going on. Which is, again, it all gels together into one solid character dialogue. This is probably my favorite dialogue so far. Which is why the work of the moral intern is so critical. It is our great bulwark against another century of bloodshed. Yeah, and the hypocrisy in that sentence is dripping. That's all. That's who he was. As I said, the loss of any life is terrible, no matter who the person may have been. I do hope you're able to bring his killer or killers to justice. We must show that the rule of law still applies, even in Revachol. Thanks, that's all I've got. A moment, officer, says our Sunday friend. Do you have everything you need from me? I'm afraid we won't have the chance to speak again once you leave. Hold on, why can't we talk later? It's against diplomatic best practices for an official in my position to be discussing murders with local militiamen. He pauses. And I'm pressed for time. After you leave, I should be leaving as well. Our logic says, that's not the real reason he's so apprehensive. Men in his position shouldn't be seen loitering around in underprivileged young men's apartments in the middle of the night. That's what our logic says. Well, I'm not going anywhere. I just want to take a look around in this apartment. Sure, go ahead. It's a beautiful space. He glances at his watch. Let me know if you have any further questions. I very well might. However, they're going to have to wait until the next episode because we're out of time for the day. So for right now, I'm Colonel RPG, and this has been Disco Elysium. I really hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and leave a comment. Like the video if you want to see the next episode come out sooner rather than later. But above all, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.